do it. Let's see, we're hitting the Let's Go Live button. Let's see if that takes. All right, looks like we're live. So, cool. Well, excited to have everybody here today. We are going to be talking about a lot of the different companies out there for builder comps, and I'm excited to have our speaker here today. So I met this gentleman, Khalib, because we were talking a lot about kind of some of the things that were happening through the whole thing that's going on with GFI and WFG. And so we got to talk a lot about, kind of the comp and some of the things that we wished the industry had as far as ownership goes. And I just loved his feedback. And I don't know if you want to say this, Khalib, or not, but you kind of been around the block a little bit and has seen a lot of the inside workings of a lot of the companies, knows a lot of the leadership in the industry. And so I wanted him to come on and voice his opinion about, how he felt about a lot of the different aspects of the industry, and really, give some insight and kind of do a little bit of a rating. Because I don't think, Khalib, have you seen anybody do anything like this before as far as, usually it's an A and B versus, right? They don't usually talk about all the different companies.
Yeah, it's typically more of how is my one company, but one company.
Oh, I think we lost. Are you still there? Oh, I think we lost Khalib. Well, we'll wait for him to hop back on, but hopefully that's not mine. Let's see. We might be drawing too much bandwidth. So today we're going to be working on talking about a lot of the different companies that are out there and kind of how they compare to each other. And the reason why I think that this is so important is because nobody really gets a chance to do this. And so a lot of times they're comparing one company versus another company. And for us to be able to kind of get a better picture of all the different companies. So Khalib has had a lot of experience with a lot of them. And so to come in and give us some of his expertise on things that he's seen around the differences with comp and leadership, and kind of if you want to be more of a producer versus more of a builder, all of those things I think are important to take into consideration when we're looking for a company that we want to work with. So what we did was we put together a board to kind of do a rating system. And with that, I think that we'll be able to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of the different companies. And I think this will be really helpful for new agents that are coming into the industry, but it'll also be really helpful for people who I think are in the industry. And I think it's important that we talk about the different aspects of it in a way that highlights, because one of the biggest complaints that I've had about being in the industry for the last 10 years is that I think the agents do more damage to the companies than the clients ever have, or probably ever could. And I think a lot of that happens because, when these spinoffs happen, we don't really do a good job of evaluating what's good and what's, I wouldn't say bad, but the strengths and weaknesses of each company. So the challenge that happens with that is it ends up very one-sided or very lopsided or very opinionated, and nobody's really had a chance to kind of come in and reevaluate or go through those different aspects of it. And it looks like we're having a little bit of a connection issue with Khalib, but we'll get him back on here and I'll show you kind of what we're working on today. So this is basically what we want to go through in these 8 different aspects of companies and how they work. So we're going to be talking about their leadership. We're going to be talking about some of the product providers they have. When we talked about comp, and him and I were kind of going through this, there's different types of comp, right? There's a difference between just how you start versus a builder comp, and then also producer comp. And some of the companies had strengths and weaknesses in different areas, and so we wanted to highlight some of that. We're also going to talk a little bit about the platform. We'll talk about some of the ownership, and then also we wanted to give a kind of a shout out as far as size and legacy goes, so that we could have a comprehensive evaluation of all of these different companies. I think we have Khalib back. So Khalib, are you there? All right, I think he's getting set up on that. So I don't have audio for you yet, Khalib.
Oh, there we go.
All right, cool. Now we
It's
got you.
Caleb. Hear me?
Caleb, sorry. So I apologize. And so I kind of just went through a little bit of the intro and what we're working on, the way that we wanted to go through it. So maybe we'll just go from right to left on this board. We can talk maybe size and legacy, and then we'll kind of just work over to the other side. And a lot of these are kind of opinionated, right? It's our feelings on them. I guess every company probably will feel a different way about different things, and I would love to chat with some of the higher ups in some of these companies to figure out some of these things. But so Khalib, do you want to go through a little bit of your background on how you got into the industry, kind of how you got some of this information? Because if I remember correctly, you started with Pinnacle, right?
Yeah, I started with WFG back in 2013, and our hierarchy became involved. I'd say more involved in 2014.
Gotcha. And then what'd you do after that?
So when I separated, I would say it was um, I thought I knew a lot about the industry, and so then I ended up relearning the industry and what I thought I knew. So I looked at a couple different outfits, stayed in the personal production side, working with state employees, teachers, and stuff like that. Before recently getting back into the building model, just because I had so many friends looking for places to go, um, and I kept referring people elsewhere, basically.
Okay. Yeah, gotcha. So do you want to talk about some of the companies that you've worked with? Do you want to mention that, or do you want to kind of keep that out of it?
So I've met with, I want to say, somebody from every company on the board. Some it was more extensive, where it was a one-time interview versus some of these companies. I've probably spent 3, 4, 5 hours with.
Okay.
Um, there's only, let me see here. I know your list. There we go. There's a couple of them that I've worked hand in hand with agents on those platforms.
Okay.
Um, but I will say most of them I have not directly been contracted with.
I gotcha. Okay. And I think that that's something that kind of happens once you're in the industry for a while. I don't know if you're anything like me, but it's like I'm willing to go see anything. I want to see what's out there, whether they're competition or I might, work with them. I haven't really bounced around in the industry, but I've seen a lot. I got invited by friends who went over to PHP, so I went and looked at that. I've looked at some PFA stuff. I haven't like dove into it really nearly as deep as you have, so I'm excited to have you on today to kind of go through some of these things and give some of your opinions about it. So, anything else that you want to say, or are you ready to jump into it?
I'm ready to jump into it. And then my computer should be back up in just a second too.
Okay, cool. So you're
So,
working on pulling that back up. Did your whole computer die? The whole thing shut down?
well, PC, so it didn't die, but the whole thing froze, and then I was disconnected.
Okay.
So
All right.
who
Well,
knows? That's the love and hate relationship with technology right now.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so do you need that to kind of start doing some of the evaluation if we start on the, I think we can start on this one. You can probably do this off the top of your head without that. So if we're looking at the size and the legacy aspect of it, um, uh, you can probably go through that while your computer's starting up, I imagine. I think you probably have that off the top of your head.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. So
yeah.
let's
No, most of this I know pretty well.
Okay, cool. So let's do that. And basically, what I'll do is I'll just drag these over and we'll kind of to set them up. So we all know the OG obviously is Primerica, right? They've been around the longest. Oh, and I think we lost Caleb again. Uh-oh. Okay, well,
I'm
I guess
I'm
it's good.
still here.
Oh, okay. I lost your video.
I have a second account logging in.
Okay, perfect. Well, we have your audio, so just go ahead and do it. And so the OG obviously being Primerica. So how are we doing the rating system? We kind of looked at like an A to an F to be able to rate.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be an F rating if they are just newer and they don't have as many agents. So the size and legacy, what was the idea around that particular column?
So size wise, I kind of just categorized, you know, the the main two is going to be your Primerica, your WFG, and those are really the only A size.
Okay.
Because they're the ones who've been around the block. They have more than 20,000 agents participating in their platform.
Okay.
Where everybody else, I would say, is in that B category, just because they all have more than 1,000 agents. Some of them have 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. So they're all around the block, I would say.
Okay, so obviously Primerica being the biggest, because they're probably about, what, 120,000 agents at this point?
I want to say something like that. Like, I don't know their specific numbers.
Okay.
Just because you hear from all these places, oh, we're growing, and you hear from other firms, oh, we just took 500 agents from them, and the typical competitive banter.
Yeah, of course. And then obviously there's always the challenge between licensed agents and then total agents because not everybody is licensed. So that kind of makes it hard as well. So I think the last number I saw is probably like 120 or so, but that was a little while ago. And then WFG, they're probably what, like 60, 70?
I would still categorize them as A.
Okay.
But yeah, they're going to have more of that 60 to 80,000 reps.
Okay. And then who would be kind of next in line after that?
So that's the hard thing is deciding how many agents are with the platform versus how many active agents.
Okay. Yeah,
And so that's where, the next person that's been around the block is PHP.
Okay. And I didn't realize PFA is older than PHP. But I think PHP is bigger.
I think so. And the reason behind is the model Patrick came out swinging, focusing on building.
Okay.
And so they really blew up that way. But I would say probably PFA and FEG are going to be more of that top B.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Up there, kind of with the PHP or above PHP?
I would categorize the rest of the companies all as B rated.
Okay.
For size.
Okay.
It's not your mom and pop IMO where it's 30 reps. And that's something I would classify as like a D size.
I gotcha.
It's literally a small team.
Yeah. Do you have any idea?
Never heard of.
Do you have any idea where Vantage or FFL or any of those? And I'm squeezing all these guys kind of into that B category.
So the hard thing about FFL is they are an independent platform, meaning you can have one contract with them and 30 elsewhere. So it's hard to gauge the amount of agents actively with them.
Okay.
Versus having like a contract or two. But I know the Experior and Vantage and GFI should all be around that like 3,500, 5,000 agents.
Okay.
Because I know they're all updating basically, bringing teams over, and then you have to look at, well, is it just US, Canada? None of my experience comes from the Canada side.
Okay.
But I think GFI, Experior, Vantage are all about the same size, sitting around 4,000 licensed reps.
I gotcha. Okay, cool. And so that kind of puts us into that category there. So if we look at...
I'm going to go ahead and switch my audio real quick, if that's all right.
Yeah, for sure. Your video's back on now too, so that's good.
All right, can you... Oh.
Yep, I can hear. No, you're good. I can hear you.
Cool. Awesome.
Okay, so anything else that you want to add to that one?
No, I mean, I would say regardless of the size, every company you're going to have somebody that's been in the industry for, 10, 20, 30 years. Every company is going to have brand new agents. And most of these companies have all stemmed basically from Primerica.
Right.
some of the core leaders in Primerica, 30 years ago. So
I gotcha. Okay, cool. So then, do you want to dive into leadership next, or I think that's the next one, or do you want to leave that towards the end? Or ownership? Sorry, ownership is the next one.
um, yeah, we can go into ownership. So most of the ownerships are going to work very similarly. I think the leading ownership, um, I say it looks at a couple different things. So ownership is, do you own what you do? And people look at that as, can I sell it? And I want to say every company listed has the ability to sell the book of business.
Okay. So why do you think there's so much of an argument around ownership? Because that's a big one that's happening with the whole GFI, WFG
Yeah.
aspect right now, right?
So so the reason is, um, and again, I don't know all the behind the scenes when it comes to the WFG GFI. Um, but basically WFG suspended ownership outright, meaning just a blanket ownership, and it was more of a case by case scenario.
Okay.
So,
And are you saying that was
and it was to
related?
prevent.
Hmm.
Well, it's just because they've lost a handful of bigger people, um, and it was to make sure nobody was taking advantage. Basically, where accusations with GFI where you have anchoring.
Hmm.
And so I think that's where WFG wanted to free stuff, saying, "Hey, we have to make sure people aren't parking one person here while secretly recruiting everybody at the same
I
time."
gotcha.
But I want to say every company has the ability to sell. The only thing I would say is I don't think GFIs is in writing.
Okay.
Um, they came out 2 weeks ago and have the whole beneficiary, the vested permission part of their ownership. Um, but they didn't have. I don't think I've seen anything about actually having in writing qualifications to sell the business.
Okay. And do you think that's
One
important
of
to
the
have?
other to have it in writing, of course.
Okay.
You know, you know, we're in the insurance industry. Our whole industry is based off contract
Hmm.
and kind of guarantee side of, hey, we are guaranteeing we will do this. Um, and so to not have it in writing or to wait a month to release it, um, I get it sells the hype, but the problem is when you don't have it in writing, it's kind of going on. I've heard somebody call it the "trust me, bro"
I
clause.
gotcha.
And in business, you don't really want the "trust me, bro" clause.
Right, you need a little bit more than that. I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So what
So
do
I would.
you look for in ownership? So just be able to sell, because there's a lot of conversation going on around that. Like what should you actually be able to do? What does
Yeah.
ownership mean?
So this is where there's different aspects of ownership. There's the do I own what I do? And that's am I vested in commissions and do I own my book of business? Now, some people label that as the same thing, and they are two different things. Owning your client, your book of business, basically says, hey, if this isn't for me, I still want to be able to service my clients if I go elsewhere.
Okay.
And with that, it also is, would you release me? And what that means to agents who have never heard of releases, when you leave a firm, and we'll pick WFG for this example. Um, if I want to leave WFG and I just wrote Transamerica and Nationwide, I think those are two big carriers with you guys. It's, can I go to somewhere else in 3 weeks and start writing those contracts? And the answer is no.
Hmm.
I can't get a release. You have to do what's called an inactivity transfer, which is you have to sit out of those carriers for 6 months.
Gotcha.
And
And
versus you take a company like FFL and they're like, yeah, we don't care, we'll sign it, and you can be writing somewhere else in 3 weeks. They typically have like an exit clause you have to sign. Basically, don't talk crap about us.
gotcha. And then what about
So
Primerica? Because you can't write Primerica if you're not with Primerica. So how does that work?
yeah, so that's kind of where um, that's where you technically have no ownership in your book, because once you're gone, you're gone. You can, as you said, you can't transfer that elsewhere to service just because there is nobody else that writes Primerica.
Gotcha. All right. So how do you want to rate these? And so what are you kind of looking at? Obviously, you're saying most of them you can sell your book of business, but how did you kind of come up with your score here?
Yeah, so the only company I would put in C category is going to be GFI,
Okay.
and that's just because half their stuff from what I've seen is more of a trust me, bro, and we are coming out with it. Which means that they're kind of that middle ground between B and C. C
And
because it's not written yet or released.
okay. And to be fair, they are still kind of new, so that you know, to their credit,
Yeah, I
that's
mean
still
the
kind of coming
rumor
out.
is Eric's been building it for a year and a half,
Okay.
so even to have, yeah, and I don't know the legal side of building all this out and the financials,
Right.
but and then everybody, um, I would say is middle B. FFL is going to be upper B, and then I would say Experior and Vantage are going to be more that AB,
Okay.
and that's um, because you own your book and because you can do third party valuations. And I know WFG is coming out with third party valuations, but the big thing is they don't release. Um, and the main thing I would say, because I've had some people argue ownership with FFL, and I was talking to a guy last night, and he said the biggest issue is the ownership only goes as far as FFL and Integrity let you.
Which
Um,
means
um, but the explanation given to me is if you want to sell it, you sell it to Integrity. It's not necessarily you can sell it third party. Integrity is going to be that first right of refusal. And they called it kind of like a golden handcuff situation,
I gotcha. Okay. So
where
that they
you still have to kind of stay affiliated with them.
okay. So they want you to sell it to them, basically, is what you're saying.
That's what the explanation I was told. Yeah.
Okay. And that's a bad thing because
Um, it's just golden handcuffs. You know, it sounds nice, it looks nice, but it also locks everything up.
okay, because if they don't want to buy it,
Uh,
you're saying? Because WFG, the reason why I'm asking is because WFG is talking
if
about something
if you don't
similar.
agree with the valuation,
Okay.
yeah, it's mainly if you don't agree with the valuation.
Okay. Because WFG is supposed
I
to
was told
be WFG is supposed to be launching something similar where they're going to have a third party evaluation. Do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing?
I think the third party valuation itself is fantastic because you want outside counsel.
You want somebody else's
The
eyes on it.
third party, yeah, yeah, and so I know the three um, attorney firms, law firms that are going to be valuating it are basically on retainer through WFG, but WFG will be allowing you to get your own third party valuation if you're going to go and find a company to do it yourself.
Okay.
Um, and that's where, again, most of these companies' ownerships are going to be very similar. The main thing that I look at that kind of puts one over the other, which is where you have the Experior, the FFL, and the Vantage, is the willing to sign releases if it doesn't work.
Okay. So, oh, that's interesting.
Um,
That's not coming up on there. I think I pull in. Interesting. Okay. So, sorry, say that again. So the Vantage and Xperia you have at the top, and those are because
yeah, I would put those as like a minus kind of thing, and then an
okay,
FFL at like a B plus.
okay,
Uh,
and then
just because when you do have other companies involved, there really is no true like A plus. Just to be fair to everybody.
okay,
uh,
all right, and then so what was below that?
I would say FFL.
FFL. Oh, FFL goes in there. Okay, and below that,
And then everybody else is kind of clumped in that middle B, with GFI being at the bottom just because
it's not
um,
finalized.
it's not finalized.
Okay. This is going to get a little tight in here. I guess we should have made those squares bigger. I thought there
Yeah.
was going to be more differentiation between the companies.
Um, yeah, I mean, we can kind of spread them out, but because I haven't worked with all these companies and I haven't seen their contracts, um, a lot of it is going off of what one agent says, and then I
Oh,
try to verify and fact check.
okay.
And so it's kind of just how repetitive is the same information if I can't find it in writing.
I gotcha.
Uh, Which that was kind of one of the big changes for me with GFI is, and I know you and I have talked about this off camera, kind of their AMA provides no ownership, with this little like clause saying, oh, there is ownership once you get here. So GFI to me was a D up until they finally announced that like 2 weeks ago in writing what their vesting clause was.
Okay. Now, I
Uh,
think
but
GFI also has one of the highest vesting clauses with what I saw because they have it at the EMD level, but you have to have 20 agents and be doing basically twice the production of an SMD, whereas maybe with WFG you get it at an MD level, but I think they have a 5-year waiting period too, right?
who has the 5 year waiting period?
WFG.
I no, I think as soon as you hit MD, you have it.
Okay.
Um, Old ownership clauses for the rights to will and sell and transfer used to have a 10-year clause, but they removed that um, sometime after I left. So that was, I want to say 2017, 18, or 19. I think they removed the time requirement clause.
Okay. I gotcha. So that's kind of where we're looking there. All right. Any other comments or you have about ownership? Anything that you would like to see? Like,
Um,
what would be a huge, I don't know, like game changer for you in the industry?
I think the main thing would be companies willing to say, you know what, we think we're the best, and we're willing to prove it by signing releases if you don't like us.
Hmm.
FFL, I think, was the first main agency of this kind of size to do that. Um, and say, you know what, if you don't like it here, we'll sign the release and let you transfer.
Hmm. Okay.
Versus, the to my understanding, the WFG, the primary, well, primary you don't need a release. And the WFG, the PFA, and the PHP didn't, and probably still don't do that. I've put it out on social media, and no one's responded that yes, you can get a release done.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. All right. Cool. So, anything else you want to add there? Or should we move over to platform?
Yeah, we can move over to platform.
All right, cool. So then what are you looking for in the category of platform? Like what does this encompass?
So so I think this is really subjective. Um, because I don't have access to almost any of these companies' platforms. So it's hard to see their back office, their tracking system, their tools and resources. Um, I've seen Vantages, I've seen FFLs, I've seen Experiors, and I've seen WFGs.
Okay, so you're including all of that, home
Um,
office, software, all of that kind of stuff included in that.
yep, yeah. So most of these, um, we should probably circle back to platform.
Okay,
We might get some input or questions from the live that might change some of this.
okay,
Um, but we should probably circle back to that one and do that with leadership.
I gotcha. Because that one's going to be a little bit more subjective, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, again, it's going to be my subjective overall view of the platform based off all the resources.
Right.
Um, we'll kind of leave that towards the end because that probably ties more in line with the overall rating I've given the companies.
Okay. And then so we can either dive into comp or should we go to product providers first?
We can go to product providers first and then go into comp.
Okay.
So,
So go ahead.
so I'll start off by saying no company in my book got an A in product providers.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
And the reason why is none of these platforms have every single carrier that you could ask for. The probably biggest library of carriers is gonna be WFG.
Okay.
Um, but I consider all these more B rated. Um, I categorized all of them as more or less B because all of them have their different niches. Where some are very extensive in the final expense market. Some have access to specialty like special annuities with the Nexus product line. Some of them have access to proprietary IULs like Vantage, FEG, and PFA have exclusive carrier products.
Okay.
Uh, so that's kind of where, in my book, all of them, with the exception of two platforms, are B rated in their options.
Okay. So who's
And that's
not?
going to be
Yeah.
so. So the one that's going to be a C rated is going to be GFI,
Okay.
and that's just being the new guy to the block, being that they don't have the carriers yet.
They're still working on
They
them.
they're still working on them, so you got to get you got to be honest in it. Where they probably will be a B when it comes to 6 to 12 months down the line,
Okay.
but right now they're not. And then the bottom, of course, is going to be Primerica, just because you're selling 95% of your insurance products is Primerica.
Okay. So where would you put them? Are
Uh,
they still B or like C or
I,
D
I
or
I put Primerica D.
D? Okay. And this is obviously excluding because if we were to include the aspect of being able to do securities, would that bring them up?
Um,
I know we were basically just going off of
it,
insurance because most people are
yeah.
insurance
So
licensed.
so I think that's an added bonus to their platform. But for product providers, I wouldn't rank it, um, because half these companies that don't have an integrated, and so some people can argue that's a strength or a weakness. That's going to be really subjective. But
Okay.
we're just looking at insurance agents, since that's going to be 95% of the people looking for a home or comparing. Um, the securities doesn't make a difference on your actual product providers for your life license.
Okay. And then what about FFL? I thought they were mostly final expense.
So they do have some IULs and they do have annuity carriers. And so that's why they are still a B, even if they do focus primarily on that mortgage protection final expense market,
Okay.
because other platforms don't focus as much in that market. But this is really where it comes down to what you're looking for. If you're looking for a final expense focused platform, um, then FFL is gonna be more in that top. Versus if you're looking for more of like a securities thing, well, shoot, now Primerica and WFG go towards the top.
Okay.
Um, so
So
that's where it's kind of subjective, but overall, with what you can do, um, I'd say all these companies, with the exception of GFI and Primerica, are B rated.
so if you wanted to write specifically IULs, basically anybody in that B category, BC category, because obviously that puts Primerica
Yeah.
out, right? Um,
Yeah, that technically flunks them out, but that's more of their belief style and why they don't have it.
correct. Okay. But all the other ones, you're going to get about the same type of an IUL.
Yeah, yeah, you have more or less the same access to carriers. Again, you're gonna have your FEG, your PFA, and your Vantage that have some exclusive products. WFG used to have an exclusive, but they opened up the FFIUL, I want to say 6 years ago to everybody in the industry. Um, and then annuity wise, I would put probably definitely Vantage, Experior, WFG towards the top, because I know they all have the Nexus product
Gotcha. Yeah.
line. So that's where it's again kind of subjective on what you're looking for.
Do you think that the line is getting blurred with these companies? Because I think probably even back when you started in the industry, but when I started about 10 years ago, it seemed like specific carriers work with specific companies, and that's kind of gone away. You can almost work with just about any carrier in any company almost, right?
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of it has to do with time. Um, 30 years ago, having an IMO was not common at all. Like the ability to go out and get multiple services. Um, back in the A.L. Williams day, it was basically pick a carrier to represent.
Hmm.
And it was, oh, I'm going to go sell for Transamerica, or I'm going to go sell for New York Life, or I'm going to go sell for Allstate or AIG. The ability to shop carriers and offer all of them, I think, has evolved, kind of like technology has,
Hmm.
to where you have a lot of these where every single company can go offer national life.
Makes sense.
And I think even WFG has them, even though most people aren't familiar. So that's where I say like product providers, WFG is probably at the top of them, um, but because people don't talk about it, people don't realize they have it.
Makes sense. I gotcha. So then, because what happens, because I remember that used to be kind of a selling point of WFG is, oh, we have Pacific Life and a lot of these companies that the other carriers didn't have. So you're saying that's not the case as much anymore?
No, yeah. Any of these agencies, if they want a contract, if they have people who want to write it, they can go get it.
Mm.
If they don't already have
Okay,
it.
cool.
No, most companies are gonna steer people to like their favorite three. Um, but that kind of goes into that, or actually, I guess it's a good transition into the compensation side. Because the more production you do with a carrier, the higher the carrier will pay the platform,
Right.
which means that that platform can then pay higher comp.
Makes sense. Yeah, because you're doing more production through them.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why you find companies that have like a favorite provider or favorite three providers.
Makes sense. Okay, and then so you want to get into comp? We'll do kind of that
Yeah.
three. So we kind of lumped all these together. Why did you want to do all three of these?
Um, because I think just saying comp is like saying I want a smoothie.
Okay.
And it's like, well, what kind of smoothie? And so that's why it's, I think, important to separate the three out from hey, what is the average agent going to start with versus what is their potential comp as a builder and their potential comp as a producer?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. So then why are those important? Because obviously, we were talking about WFG being one of the lowest now for starting comp. So how does this calculation kind of take place? Is starting comp most important? Is a builder's comp more important? Like, how do you evaluate how that's important to somebody?
Yeah, and so I think it comes down to what somebody's looking to do. I know a handful of people that they don't want to build, they don't want to go through this monthly qualification thing. Um, and they just want to write business, put their head down, open up their own brick and mortar or their own agency, and it's basically them and four assistants in the back.
Okay. Why
Um,
wouldn't you then do
versus
do an IMO, something like that, and just become independent in case you wanted to
exactly, and so
build?
that's where I was gonna say that's and I know I've sent you kind of some of my like cheat sheet stuff on the carriers. That's why none of them got an A rated.
Okay.
Um, starting comp, because if you want the highest starting comp, you go direct to the IMO and you get whatever that carrier pays out is what's called street.
Makes sense. Okay. So which one do you want to start with?
So
Starting, builder, or producer comp?
let's go starting.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, WFG is probably the lowest starting comp. Their base comp is 25%.
Okay. Yep.
And that's where you get that, yeah, that D rating. The next is going to be where the bulk of everybody is, which is that D plus C minus C. So the 30% starting is going to be your GFI, your PFA, and your PHP.
Okay. Sorry, say that one more time. GFI, PHP.
PFA, GFI, PFA, PHP.
Okay.
And then right above that's going to be your Primerica. I was told they now start at 35%.
Okay. Do you think that's something that WFG can and or should work on?
So the biggest thing that's going to tie their hands is the fact it's not one company in charge of necessary comp.
Okay.
It's the fact that you have WFG plus Transamerica plus Aegon.
Hmm.
And I think, I don't want to say it's my opinion, that it's hard to do comp increases when you have shareholders who are like, wait, why are you going to get rid of 30% of our earnings?
Makes sense.
And WFG showed is proof that in a low comp setting, you can still have very successful people. But I think with most of these companies, the reason they have high turnover is because they have low comp.
Hmm.
And it makes it to where you have to do more work for the same pay.
Okay. Do you
And
do you feel like there's high turnover in the whole industry though? Because I kind of relate it with real estate, and in
yeah,
my experience, I don't have too many people who do something and fail. It's
yeah,
usually that they don't do anything. So how much of an
correct.
impact do you think comp has on that?
So I think the comp is deterrent upon your licensed agents that stay,
Okay.
not the amount of agents who get licensed.
Correct.
So
What? Okay. But I'm still saying, to kind of agree or push back on that a little bit, is like the ones who stay are usually the ones who do stuff.
yeah,
Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah. So I think that's where a lot of agents in the companies that we're talking about start on a referral or part-time basis
Correct.
where it's transitioning. Um, and we'll say company A as an insurance provider. That way we're not naming any carriers. Um, but if you can look at a company like, we'll say WFG, GFI, where you're making that 25-30% starting with carrier A, versus going to the three carriers we haven't mentioned, which is going to be your Vantage, your FFL, and Experior, and your comp with that carrier would be 60%. That's where you start noticing the licensed agents are saying, well, hey, if I'm selling $10,000 a month in premium, or my first case is 3,000 or whatever it is, and they're going, well, at $3,000, those guys would pay me 1,500, 1,600 bucks versus, I'm sorry, yeah, 3,000, so 1,500 versus the platform I'm with is only paying me 700.
Makes sense. Yeah,
So that's where that starting comp I think makes a difference, and then works into that builder comp and personal comp.
okay.
Uh, because that, nobody, trying to think how to politically correct, say it politically correct. The the same benefit of running a McDonald's franchise is also why people don't like it. Is there's a system, it can be profitable, um, but you also know you're giving up a bunch of your earnings to McDonald's because you have to do
The way they
basically
want
their
it to.
prices, but their system, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and so with the three that we've left at the top being the Vantage, the Experior, and the FFL, Um, they're all going to be pretty similar in their starting comp for agents. Um, that Vantage and Xperia are going to be higher, I think, than FFL and like your IUL products.
Okay.
Um, but FFL is going to have the highest title.
Say that
What I
again.
mean by that,
Yeah.
they're going to have the highest title. And the reason why is they give a percentage in the title, so they'll say, "Oh, we're going to start you at 80%."
Mm. Do
This is
you
where people learn about grids.
right? Do you think that's a good thing for a company to be able to start you off at different places versus having to earn your way through it?
Um, yes and no. So I think when you're looking at comp, you're going through kind of a what am I getting versus getting.
Correct.
So, yeah, if I'm with any of these agencies, I'm going to be giving up a little bit of comp compared to street. But in exchange, I'm getting a system, I'm getting mentorship, I'm getting a path of success versus going out and trying to do it all from scratch, do it by myself.
Right.
However, I think FFL shined a spotlight on things, almost probably about 10 years ago, where they said, hey, we're willing to publicly say what the comps are.
Mm.
And it shined a light saying, well, hey, if we can afford to pay 120% comp or 110 or 105, or because I know they have their highest paying provider. And then you can go and look at say, well, shoot, why am I only getting 45% if this company is willing to pay at 105?
Mm.
And again, I think it comes more with these legacy companies on they have more brick and mortar infrastructure, they have higher costs. Um, they were they were built before the huge technological advances that we have right now,
Mm.
like the ability with some softwares you can plug in one person and get 7 different quotes.
Right.
Running that in 2001 was like, wait, what are you trying to do?
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
so So I think that's kind of why there's a big discrepancy in comp, but also now you have certain profit margins that older companies aren't willing to give up.
I gotcha. So what's your rating for builders comp? Where,
So builders comp, there's two different arguments. There's going to be the base shop comp spread for a builder,
okay,
and then there's the SMD, RVP, EMD, all these companies different, but basically I call them brokers versus a broker and above comp. So base shop comp, I'm not a huge fan of the way some people brag about their builder base shop. And that's because it's saying, hey, I'm at 70% and I start my person at 30, so I now have a 40% spread, and they're bragging about it.
mm,
Because going back to starting comp, in my head, most products you should be starting at 50% or around, give or take 5. Because that's what most career agencies, like New York Life, a Guardian, those more traditional brick and mortar places have. Versus, hey, now that I'm a broker, what is my builder comp opportunity when it comes to getting generational overrides, or bonuses, or generational stacks?
right.
So this is where companies all argue that they can build, but kind of my perspective on having a building platform may not weigh it the same as other people. And so
Gotcha.
we'll start with kind of the what I think is kind of the least beneficial building provider is going to be FFL.
Okay. So
And
you
the
would,
reason is I would put them down at C because you can still recruit, you can still build. It's purely based off a spread. Meaning
gotcha.
it's whatever the difference in contract is.
Okay.
So if my new guy's at an 80 and I'm at a 90, I get 10%.
Gotcha.
Again, that's their contract level, not the pay, because most of their carriers pay 20, 30% less.
Okay.
But once you match, there's then something called flanking. So once you're the same contract level as somebody else, you no longer get that override.
At all of their tiers?
Well, my understanding is all of the tiers, you might get some kind of bonus based off your team production.
Mm.
But once somebody matches you in contract, you're no longer getting that direct override.
So they don't do like the PHP where that breaks into a separate, like a SMD type thing where you still have the override of that.
Exactly.
So you flanked and then those points don't count for you.
So the points count, the commissions don't.
Okay.
Point
That's an important
promotion.
distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the points still count for you to get that next level. But
You just
it's
don't
not
get
where
paid
you
on
want
them.
it.
Okay. I gotcha. Okay, and then who's kind of above that?
Let me see, builders comp. So that's then where I would group the Experior, or I would say PFA, Primerica, WFG are then the next three. And that's because all their generationals are about the same. Slightly above them, I would put Experior. And that's because they have a little bit of incentives for you to recruit, and you still get some kind of override off of direct.
Okay.
But all four of those companies are going to provide generational. And then the three top, I would say, this is where you get into is a stacking. I call it stacking comp or stacking generational, which is where if there's a contract difference, it adds to your generational versus just getting bonuses paid out. So I would say next would be GFI, because they have all these bonuses planned into their comp. The problem is with bonuses, it now means you have to re-qualify every month.
I gotcha.
The
So it
top-
can be good, can be not good.
Can be good, can be not good. And then the top two I would say is Vantage and FEG. And the reason why is they have something that they call like infinity overrides, which is where as you get bigger, your personal comp is being increased, but that difference in comp adds to your generational override. So where your base generation might be, most of these companies have like a 12 to 15% first gen override. If there's a 10% difference, and we'll say in WFG terms, you're an SMD, but you're being overridden by a CEO. The title difference also is a comp difference of, let's say, 10%, 5% per level. And that 10% now gets added to that first generation override.
Gotcha.
So now you as a builder are overriding your first gen, let's say 22%.
Makes sense.
And then what that also means is, I think FEG's is 6 generations, and Vantage is going to be 7 generations of guaranteed overrides. And once you get past that, that's where you have what this infinity override is. And that's where, hey, if you don't have somebody in that leg of the same contract level as you, we'll add that difference in comp to do an 8th gen plus.
Gotcha.
So as a broker contract, you get paid I'm going to use Vantages. So as a broker contract, you get 7 generations of overrides as a SMD or broker, because all these companies are using different. I think there's Vantage's MD is their broker title. But once you get a level above that, you're now adding that comp difference to all your 8th gen plus. So now if you're somebody that you have, we'll say 12 generations deep of brokers, it now gives you an ability to still override that 12th generation if you've been building your organization to where now you're like a CEO or executive.
So you take a Swan Win type of guy who probably loses more money on his in his lower generations than he does on the top generations than he makes on the top.
You probably look at somebody like a Swan Win, and realize, shoot, that guy probably only overrides maybe a third of his organization.
Right.
And so now you add that back in, and shoot, that's another 5-10% off 80% of his organization.
Just huge.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, so yeah, that's kind of where I value that long-term builder side, and why those two agencies are going to be A-rated.
Now, how about the bonuses? And I don't know about the other companies, but for WFG, for instance, they have the EMD where you start participating in that pool, and then you have above that you have the different pools and brackets that you can basically get
Yeah.
into. How much does
So
that lead to it?
bonuses are great, but it's a requalification of comp that's already there. So that's where, if you're looking at stuff saying, well, hey, if I can be at, we'll use Vantage because I'm more familiar with them than I am FEG. If I'm already making a 22% override off my first generation, but at WFG, do you know what the first gen is? Is it 14?
Uh, it depends on how you calculate it too. I don't know. I think it's 15, 12 or 15. No, it's 12.
Okay.
I think it's 12.
All right. So we'll say 12, and then you get your bonus. You hit your bonus that month, and so now you're at 15. So the bonus is nice, but if you're taking home a 15%
It's
off
kind
your
of a
first gen
guaranteed.
versus other agencies now paying you 22%. It's, yeah, you have a bonus, but I don't. But I still make 7% more off my generation,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense. Because everybody's working with the same dollar. It's where
100%.
I just think these legacy companies are going to find a harder time competing.
Gotcha. And to their credit, they've also put this stuff in place a long time ago. So these new ones that are coming out have
Yeah,
the opportunity
yeah, it's
to
stuff
look at
that's
that.
worked very well for. Yeah, and it's worked out very well for them, and why change if it works? It gives something. It gives people something to shoot for. So I understand the marketing behind it.
And
It helps.
I think I think it is important to change on. That's why I'm happy that we're doing this, because a lot of people talk about ownership and what they want a company to look like. And whenever I ask somebody that, they go, "Well, I don't really know." And I go, "Okay, well, how can you demand it from a company and ask them to change if you don't even know what you want?" So for us to have
Yeah,
this conversation, I think is important. We go, okay, I didn't realize Vantage had that. So maybe that's something that we can ask for and look at and go, okay, I need to look at what they have going on and how do we adapt that into what we have, if it works. And maybe it doesn't, but at least it gives us the opportunity to talk about it.
yeah, no, and that's a thing that a lot of people have noticed over, I would probably say, since 2015, is just the transparency of what other companies are doing helps make competition, but it also keeps everybody competitive.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we'd all work for the same company.
Yeah. Well, if the
We wouldn't
leadership,
be having this conversation about 9 different platforms.
yeah, if the leadership could ever get along, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. So, okay, cool. So let's go into
That's true.
producer comp.
Yep. So producer comp, um, I've been told, and this is something I haven't had as much recent updates on versus when I was looking at these companies in 2017 through 2019, where I was kind of keeping my ear out while still not wanting to get into building. But I would say the lowest personal comp platform is going to be your WFG and your PFA. And WFG is going to be at the bottom just because I believe every company pays more than 65%.
Okay. And then above that,
So then you get into your, let me see here. You're going to get into your Primerica and your PHP. And then next would be your FE, or I think next is GFI and FEG, but I'd probably actually put PHP above uh, GFI.
Okay.
GFI is kind of mid to low pack.
Now, why is PHP higher?
My understanding of their comp and their grid means that they do actually pay out um, decently high, like they've been increasing it.
Okay.
Um, and I would probably put the GFI and the PHP and Primerica in the B category.
Oh, you would put, sorry, which one? GFI? Oh, GFI, PHP, and Primerica in the B category. Okay.
No, the main thing that holds them into kind of this B, C, like B minus thing is the fact that I believe all of their stuff requires you to recruit.
Okay.
And we take GFI's EMD contract, and you have to have, your 20 licensed agents. You have to be making six figures to get that. That what was it 80%, which is where we get the other three being the Experior, and then I would go Vantage and FFL. And all three of these companies have the ability for you to get their top comp without recruiting.
Okay.
Um, you can hit their top without a single agent license under you.
So do you have them as a
And
high B or an A?
I would put Experiors in that high B, low A, and then I would put Vantage and FFL in middle A.
Okay.
And the reason why Experior I would put slightly lower is to get their top comp. It's still a monthly requalification.
Okay.
So whatever you do in March then gives you a bonused personal comp for April.
Okay. And then FEG, where do they go?
Oh, I forgot an image. FEG I would probably put in that slightly under Experior.
Okay. Kind of in that area.
Yeah, and that's because with their stacking comp, I believe their compensation is going to be higher than everybody, with the exception maybe put PHP higher than FEG.
Okay.
I'd probably switch those two.
Okay. Kind of do like that a little bit.
And that's just, again, my understanding of their comp. I think FEG sets aside more of the personal comp to that generational side. And then FFL and Vantage are going to have kind of two competing compensations, where FFL is going to be focusing on that more simplified issue market.
Okay.
Versus Vantage is doing more of that advanced market, the IUL and annuity space.
Okay. Yeah, and so how would you make the difference there? So FFL, and I believe FFL also does leads, right? So you got to figure, from the guys that I've talked to, it's about 20% of your budget into purchasing leads.
Yeah. So the thing with leads is there are some changes happening to the lead industry this year, as far as being able to resell age leads and stuff like that. But any company you can work for WFG and do leads. Most people I talk to from FFL still don't buy leads through their FFL system. They buy leads when stuff goes on clearance or has a huge sale, when they're getting 30% off. But they're typically either self-generating or using a third-party lead provider.
Gotcha.
But their system is very much built around, we're going to do a 4-hour dial session, and we're going to take lunch and do another 4-hour dial session. And so that's where you're going to get those. FFL is kind of unique in the platforms we're comparing, to where they have this, hey, you need to make 300 dials today.
Right.
I mean, shoot, if you're in WFG making $300 for the day, everyone's like, my goal is to call my top 25 today. You're calling top 300.
Yeah,
So it's just a different marketing focus, I think.
I gotcha. Okay, cool. Anything else you want to add to comp?
No, I think that's pretty. We covered the general side of everything pretty well.
Okay, cool. And then let's go into, you want to do leadership? And obviously this is subjective.
Yeah. So leadership, I didn't rank, and that is because it is 100% subjective. Um, on your experience. You can have two agents working with the same platform, and the difference in leadership is going to yield completely different results.
I gotcha.
I think the advantage, and we'll start with two agencies whose leadership has an advantage,
Okay,
which is going to be WFG and PHP.
okay,
And the reason why is WFG, you have Ed Milet, which is known outside of the platform. Same with PHP, you have Patrick. Patrick is known outside of the platform. No other agency that I'm aware of has any of their big leaders that are well known in like the public speaking or the real estate or any of these other sections. If you mention Patrick to somebody like that's entrepreneur mind, like, oh yeah, I've seen his TikToks or his YouTube, or you have a lot of real estate agents and business owners who know Ed Milet from his Max Out thing he did a few years ago, um, where a lot of them didn't even know Ed Milet was involved in insurance.
makes sense. Yeah,
They
you're right.
just knew him from a public speaker kind of setup.
Right. And then
Uh,
PHP, kind of same thing with Patrick Bet David. Even though he's out, I think, for me at least, whenever I say Patrick Bet David, I think of PHP.
exactly. Now, that a lot of people say, oh, well, now he's kind of not involved as much with the company. So again, that's where I just bring and pay from a marketing standpoint. It's two names that are known outside of the industry.
I gotcha.
But I will say, from a leadership perspective, it's a lot of um, do you have people having success to look to? And that's where I have favorites because of leadership, but that's because of who I've seen, talked to, and experienced myself. And I think every one of these platforms has somebody that has great leadership and terrible leadership.
Of course, yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we get this gray area of a positive and negative from one of the newer platforms,
Oh, yeah.
being GFI.
I gotcha.
GFI will pound on their chest and swear to about their leadership, um, which for Pinnacle, their leadership has been excellent. Outside of Pinnacle, I want to say basically every team I've talked to that was outside Pinnacle didn't like the Pinnacle leadership because of some questionable antics, and we'll just leave it as they've been of what they're accused of in the WFG versus GFI suit.
I gotcha.
That has been said to have been a 15-year rampant thing that they always do.
I gotcha. Now, what about
And so,
what's his name, Sean Miyake, the one for FFL? But he's not really out there doing a lot of stuff. I know he tries to, but I don't think he
he
has the presence of like a Patrick Bet David or an Ed Milet.
he had a lot of presence, I would probably say, in like 2016, 2017, 2018,
Okay.
when their whole thing about being the highest paying platform and oh, we'll beat the comp. Um, I don't see nearly as much stuff involving him as I did, 7 years ago. And I think that's because they're the mission of one-upping comp shot them in the foot.
Yeah, because didn't they have to bring
Where
it down recently after selling to Integrity?
so the comp has stayed the same. My understanding is that the guidelines
Changed.
basically shifted down. So now what used to be required for a higher level is now one lower. So it makes it to where it's a little more difficult to get to their top comp. But I think changes had to be put in place because people were basically just trying to one up. There are tons of time I've seen on Facebook where somebody says, "Oh, we'll start you at 80," and somebody going, "Oh, well, if you go with me, I'll give you 85." Oh, if you go with
Yeah,
me, I'll give.
that was my question to you about being able to select somebody's comp coming in as far as being a negative to me. Because obviously, I've been approached by different companies and they say, hey, we'll bring you over at this. And although, having some experience in the industry is obviously helpful, but to just go to have that exact antics that you're talking about and going, oh, well, I'll bring you at 10% more because I like you. Although that
Yeah.
could be a good thing for a new agent, it's not necessarily good from a company standpoint. I do like, and maybe because I'm more structured, I like having
Yeah.
that. I know what I need to hit and what I need to do to get to the next level.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
just
so
who do I
I
need to
think
kiss
that
up to to get to the next
right.
level.
So I think that's two different things. I think a company honoring your title and comp when you come over to their platform
Is different.
is, is different than saying, "Hey, I'm just going to give you 5% more than Steve with the same company."
And the same
I
office.
think, yeah. So, and I think that right there breeds bad behavior because as leadership, there has to be some kind of incentive for you to train people. And when all of a sudden you have a team of people that need training, but you're making little to no override off of it, and I've seen a lot of agents who don't want to split.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
and
hard
I think,
for any new agent, not just in FFL, but to get somebody to understand the importance of
yeah,
splitting. Yeah.
yeah. So I think, yeah, and yeah, being able to split is important. I think if you're overriding somebody, that then gives you an opportunity to maybe reduce the split you're taking. Um, so that's, but yeah, not to get sidetracked on comp. Yeah, comp is an interesting thing that you can argue for and against. Really, any of them. Um, but I think the big thing going back to that starting comp is what does every agent kind of guaranteed to start with versus starting as an experienced agent moving over.
Makes sense. All right, cool. And then
Uh,
anything else you want to add to that? I know leadership is kind of tough, and everybody has people that they like to follow. And
I mean, yeah, that's again, every company has A leadership as well as B leadership. And so like I've seen leadership with um, PFA, and I've seen some that are great and some that are not great. I've seen the leadership at Vantage, and their co-founders are amazing. I know many of them personally. So that's where my bias would put Vantage up at A leadership. And then I also know some Experior leadership, and I put 2 or 3 of their guys at A, and I put some of their guys at B and C and D. FFL leadership, I know there's some A because I've heard of people talking about their great leadership. The ones I've been exposed to and seen puts it more at like a BDC side.
okay.
But that's because a lot of feedback is, oh, if you're not having success, go buy more leads.
Yeah, which
And
is
that's kind
tough.
of a trickle down effect, I think. It makes me think of you're being more on a conveyor belt. You're basically just buy leads, put them here, sell, call, no throw. Like it's a very exhausting thing.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, so that's I don't know. I think the only other thing from a leadership side, just because again they're the most prevalent right now that I see on my feed is GFI touting their leadership. I think some of the concerns also comes from some of the people who have been terminated from WFG for the types of business practices they do.
Yeah.
versus some of the leadership I see on there, like, oh, cool, like that person is someone I did admire while there.
Right.
And so that's, you're going to get pretty polarizing views of GFI um, based upon your experiences, which again, mine's going to be biased and I would put them at C.
Okay.
Eric is like a Grant Cardone. I think he's a great motivational speaker. He's very driven. But there's a lot of other leaders I would not want sitting down with my parents or grandparents.
I gotcha. Okay.
So, but versus other companies I would trust to sit down with my family.
Yeah, makes sense.
But again, personal opinion.
Right.
That's probably the most controversial thing we've said.
Yeah, we're gonna make sure we piss off everybody today, so we don't want to miss anybody. So anyway.
Right.
Anyway, okay. So last one, platform. Now, what went into your ideas on platform?
Yeah. So it was kind of a combination of everything we've talked about. And that ranked a little bit into, I know we did like a golf score metric off to the side. But most of these companies, I would say, are equally competitive, just in different fields. Like Primerica, the overall platform, I personally would qualify as a C. But I know I put them more into a B. They do have a security side. They know their securities and their term very well. A lot of their agents, a lot of their platform doesn't perpetuate high knowledge of advanced markets, nor do they really sell FIAs. But most of these are going to be B. I think the two leading platforms are going to be your Experior. They have a pretty robust platform. GFI I gave a B just because I haven't seen a lot of what they're talking about. And typically the answer I get back is, oh, it's coming. Oh, it's coming. Oh, it's coming. Vantage is somebody I would definitely put up at an A. But I've also seen their stuff firsthand. And that's where I'd probably put them as the top platform. Because of what I've seen them do outside of just life insurance. I've seen their business planning stuff, a lot of the software, their digital F&As and stuff. And that's just where I have more recent exposure, we'll call it. And then everybody else trickles in at that B range. WFG originally was low at that kind of C level up until you factor in a broker dealer. I think TFA is very robust. So I think that's what makes WFG a solid B in this. But that's kind of where, based off all the conversations, that's where I kind of rank everybody.
Okay. So you put
based off everything we.
Yeah. And so you'd put FFL in there too, in that kind of B area.
Yeah. I put FFL in kind of next to Primerica.
Okay.
C plus B minus. You have really good people. You have some good system stuff. But I also know they're in the middle of like transitioning their platform. So a lot of things are kind of, from what I've been told, are limbo. I'm like I do have, I think, a contract with them somewhere. So I can I've looked up some of their stuff. It was just very underwhelming, we'll say. But that's because I looked for specific things that I needed. So most of my FFL wasn't off personal experience. I had other guys I interviewed. But I did have a contract or two with them at some point. I know I looked at them in 2017, 2018, when I was trying to learn about leads. And it's not something I really run. I think I do like one lead order a year just to say I do it.
Just to try it.
I call. Yeah, let me call 25 people and see how this works. and it's more so that when people ask me what works, because I have other lead stuff, it's just that focus of final expense mortgage protection. That's where I'm not familiar with. I call here and there to say I call here and there, which is what I let agents know when they ask my opinions on leads. I go, hey, I purchased an order from that company because you asked, but I haven't done any religious, like, let me do, 5 orders back to back and see how they turn out.
Gotcha. Cool. So I think that kind of completes anything else. Anything that you want to add to that as we kind of wrap this up? Like in your making a decision, because for me, looking at your kind of rating in the system, it looks like you have Vantage and Experior towards the top of what you like the best. Any particular reasons?
Yeah. So it depends on what we're comparing against. When I ran this kind of a golf score through an algorithm based off the ratings we did, Vantage came in at number 1.
Okay.
Experior was a little bit lower, and then this is where you kind of get this very, very close rating where FFL was then considered third, but the gap between second and third was pretty decent compared to the gap between third, fourth, and fifth.
Okay.
And that's where FFL, FEG, and PHP are all going to be kind of that third, fourth, fifth.
Sorry, say that again. PHP, FEG.
FFL is that third, fourth,
Oh,
fifth.
Third, fourth, fifth. Gotcha. Okay.
And that's where we're looking at the focus, where FFL is going to be higher on the personal comp lead market side versus FEG is going to be that highest generational versus PHP is just a builder focused platform. Where your personal comp might not be as competitive, but through recruiting, that's where those 3 kind of stack.
Okay.
And actually at GFI and WFG tied.
Okay.
We've seen some things where GFI is higher in like comp, but they're still in development, and I think that hurts them a little bit.
Right.
That works for WFG is going to be that they have TFA. Having
Okay.
that security side definitely gave them some bonus, but for 95 in the industry, that doesn't matter. When we're talking to 3,000 insurance agents.
Makes sense. Yep. Okay. And then PFA and Primerica.
Yeah. And there are ones where I'm less familiar with their stuff, but it's also Primerica is last purely because it's hard for them to compete on certain things because they just don't do it. And they can't be competitive in product offering or provider offering because they don't have a bunch of providers. They can't be as competitive in even product because you're selling one main term versus you and I, we have the ability to shop 7 different term providers and say, hey, cost-wise, this is better, benefit-wise, this is better, and kind of shop from there.
Yeah. Any idea why Primerica doesn't do that?
If you start offering another insurance provider and they're better at it than you, then by your own merit of offering the best term, buy term, invest the difference. I think it would make them have to either change the structure of their term. And Primerica is a publicly traded company. Right? One of their things they throw in is, you get stock. And it's great, but it's also an Achilles heel because now you're also controlled by making sure you're staying profitable and attractive to your stockholders. And I guess that's one thing we didn't talk about is stock and equity.
Yeah.
So and that was, I think, something I probably factored into the platform when we were talking about this like a week and a half ago. Um, Vantage, GFI, and Experior have equity opportunity. I know PHP already sold. I don't know if there's a second wave coming or if second wave happened. I just know they did some of that equity distribution when they did the integrity deal.
I gotcha.
But as far as equity being given out to agents, WFG and Primerica already went past that phase.
Right.
So if
Yep.
somebody's to kind of get in at the ground up, that's kind of where you look at those. And I don't know GFI now, maybe you don't, if they're setting us out a certain percentage of ownership or how that works.
Yeah, the only thing I've read in the court documents is that they were promising it to people, but I just don't know how or if that actually worked out.
Yeah, and again, a lot of it is being that they don't have a lot of stuff public or in writing. It's kind of, again, a trust me bro thing. To where, from my understanding, they're gonna give it out. It's gonna be like an EMD above qualification, maybe a CEO. I don't know their titles. Um, versus Experior offers a specific share per qualification, versus Vantage is going to be setting aside a percentage of the company, and it's based upon your involvement in the growth in a point-based system. Um, so there are, three different sides to having equity, but it's hard to compare side by side, and we don't even know who the third, what the metrics are for the third person.
Right. I gotcha. Okay,
So,
cool. Well, hopefully this is helpful for a lot of people. And if you're looking for a home or you're not really sure where to go, maybe you've been displaced in the stuff that's going on and you're looking for some place to go, hopefully this has kind of been helpful. It's been helpful for me to kind of understand too in just understanding what's out there and what the competition's talking about, because nobody ever does a comparison side by side or like this. It's always A versus B, and it's like, okay, well, what about C? And I think in those situations you can always find a way for one to be better, and that's what I appreciated about you, was you were willing to say, well, it's better in this area in this particular situation, but in this situation this one might be better. And so I appreciate you kind of bringing in some of that expertise of looking at all these different companies and saying where they're stronger and where they're weaker to help somebody make a decision of what's most important to them. So, but what's interesting to me, and tell me if this has been the case for you, no client has ever asked me what company I'm with. I don't know if you've ever had that happen.
Unless you talk about it yourself to the client. Again, I earlier I mentioned National Life Group. I'm selling National Life Group through, I want to say 7 of the 9 companies offer it, maybe 8. So to the client experience, it's all the same opportunity. Or if you're selling Fidelity and Guarantee, I think the only 2 that don't or can't is GFI and Primerica. Uh, and same with some of the other carriers. Like most of the opportunity across these platforms, it's still the same product, minus the exclusive products that FEG, Vantage, and PFA have.
I gotcha. Cool.
So, again, it's more what's behind the scenes. What are you looking for? What's the training? And of course, my view of it or my bias of it's going to be different than somebody else, because every person with the company we've talked today, they're going to come in and say, "Oh, we should have been number one." And
Yeah, of course, of course. And I'd love to have those conversations too to find out why and get some updated information on some of these things. But I think this kind of, so if you were to, I guess a good question kind of as we close out here is, let's say you were already in one of these companies. Because obviously we're talking about differences here, right? Let's say you're already doing well in PHP or you're already doing well in Experior, and in your opinion, Vantage is a little bit better. Is it worth leaving everything behind to switch to another company for, like, how big are the differences we're talking between the highs and lows of
Yeah.
these guys?
So so in our golf score we weighed everything equally versus size of your company being the same weight as your starting comp, being the same weight as your product provider. So the main thing is going to come down to what or who, or I guess what metric do you value most? And in my mind, even though it was all equally weighted, Vantage would have a much higher lead because I value what my agent's personal comp is
Okay.
really high. And so that, to me, that what is my starting comp? Um, it has always been something that since 2017 I've factored in,
Okay.
where I need to make sure my newest agent is making good money because I think it plays bigger in retention.
Hmm.
Because if my guy can make more money consistently, if this is what they want to do, they can leave their job faster, and it
Ma-
gives them that financial freedom. Versus if you value what spread is the highest on your personal builder side because you have a team, where all you guys do is recruit, recruit, recruit. Well, your starting comp doesn't matter because all you're concerned about is that override of your base shop.
Right.
Uh,
And
but
that's
that's why I like.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of your preference, what you like.
Yeah, that's my preference, and because I know these agencies are making 120 to 170% on their contracts,
Hmm.
um, that's my biggest thing from a we'll call it an integrity side of I just don't like offering a certain below a certain contract level to somebody.
Hmm.
Um, where it's part of the system, but I know it's because XYZ company is keeping a 40% override.
Hmm.
Where XY, the leadership maybe isn't involved in something. Um, so that's why my personal bias is going to be more of definitely Vantage, looking at Experior, looking at um, FFL. But the main difference is, hey, if you want to build, what is the building opportunity? And I know GFI is the new the new
Mm-hmm.
company, and so they're going to be the loudest.
Yeah.
Um, but my big thing is, when you come out and say you're the most competitive, but you're not competitive in anything outside of bonuses, like they're going to out bonus everybody. Um, but bonuses only apply to your top 1% of people of your
Hmm.
agents.
I gotcha.
Um, like, yeah, but bonuses aren't going to matter to 99% of your agents, so stop talking about it.
I mean, it
It's a higher
helps.
level comp.
Yeah, it helps bring people over for sure.
It looks fancy on your comp grid. When you
Yeah.
talk about 133%, um, but if only 105 pays out consistently, then it's really 105. Or
Yeah.
whatever the number is. I don't know the number.
So I wanted to
But
ask that question again because I don't know if it got answered. But let's say you're doing well in one of these companies, is it worth
yeah, yeah.
leaving and moving to another one? Like, is the difference that much?
Um, to somebody who is not currently running a large team, or you're wanting growth opportunity, I would say making a switch is typically a smart thing to consider. It's going to be your more bigger leaders who, oh, I have a team of 700 agents.
Hmm.
And is it worth it from their standpoint? Um, and so that's really where it comes down case per case. A lot of these companies, and I'll pick on like a PFA and Primerica, because they were lower scored. Um, it it's worth looking into even if you're a big person or like high up, um, because being in leadership isn't necessarily about what are you personally getting out of it. It's what does your team get out of it.
Mm.
Um, and that's where I'd always been willing to have the conversation, whether I had 5 people on my team or 30 people on my team. It's, well, hey, what's going to be a best opportunity for my people? And then I have to weigh it against, kind of the pros and cons of myself, because I'm even like trying to kind of say, I've been direct to carrier. I've been in the premier agent clubs with before, um, and I've had very high personal comp because I've hit personal producing metrics. And going to any of these companies um, has been or would have been, if I went with some of these, would have been a significant comp drop.
Mm.
The the compensation that I've earned on my personal pin as a take home percentage was higher, but I had to decide, hey, what is more important and what is more valuable long term. And
Mm.
so that's where I was more in a personal producer setup. I said, hey, you know what? Looking at we'll pick the newer three. Looking at GFI, Experior, and Vantage, um, what do I want? Where do I want to be 5 years from now? Where do I want to be 10 years from now? And it made more sense to have those conversations with those platforms um, than it was being like, oh, I make 5% more. I'm not going to entertain the conversation,
Mm.
which is what I see a lot of people do. Oh, I make 5% more here, or oh, I have a 1% higher bonus here. Um, and if you're in the industry and your experience, you really have to kind of examine your business as a whole. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, and that's where I don't want to give a blanket statement.
Answer. And I
Don't think
appreciate that.
blanket statements work when everything is so individualized.
For sure. So that's where I think if you know your personality and what you want to do in the industry, you can look at those different categories and say, well, this is where I'm strong. I want to be a builder. I want to be more of a producer. So this will help you kind of decide which company to go with.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I had difficulties when examining Xperia versus Vantage, um, because they had different strong points. But I knew that because of what I liked, it wasn't going to be going to a PHP.
Mm, I gotcha.
So there's stuff where I knew that I didn't want to do, and again, it's all personal situations.
Makes
Because
sense.
somebody at PhD is going to be pissed off I just said
Right, of course. Hopefully, we made everybody equally bad today. So, but I appreciate you, and I appreciate you bringing in some of that information because I think for a lot of agents right now, and I've talked to a lot of WFG guys, a lot of GFI guys. That's kind of where most of my relations are. Some PHPs. The COVID changed a lot of things for people, and a lot of people aren't really sure what to do or where to go or there's a lot of challenges with thinking about moving companies because I'm kind of a loyalist. If I do anything, I probably stay with one or I'll leave the industry. But a lot of people don't want to disappoint their leadership or their friends or their team, and
that.
it's a big decision to make a jump like that and decide where to go and what you want to do, and because it's not just your livelihood at stake. There's everybody else's livelihood at stake too, and so it's a big decision to make. So I appreciate you coming on and helping with that. Oh, we've got a question on here too. Does Vantage offer securities license? I don't think they do. License opportunities. Do you know?
So I know they have, I think, three broker dealers or RAs that they're vetting, because they do have a lot of agents that have had security licenses. And I know yesterday they were even at the stock exchange in New York. So it is definitely something that they're trying to, or have been trying to move forward. Just switching broker dealers is a pain in the butt for anybody who has had their securities license.
Yeah.
So I know it's something where it's on the cusp, but I didn't value it in there because it's it's not signed. Like, if the company doesn't have it yet, then I didn't factor that in,
Makes sense.
or weigh it down to anything significant.
Cool. So again, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you, and hopefully this was helpful for people. I think this is probably the most comprehensive video anybody's ever done. So I appreciate you helping put all this stuff together and your time and effort. Anything you want to end with?
No, I
As
mean,
I
if you
put you
have
on the spot.
questions, you guys can feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you or to talk to you?
I mean, my name's on everything. I think is probably the same. It's Caleb Duran.
And I keep calling you Caleb. Sorry,
Um,
Caleb.
you're good. I've been called uh, Caleb, Kyle, Pleb, Cable, and then the one-off one is I keep getting called Jacob. So
Okay.
it is the number one like wrong name I get called.
And so we've met
Um,
on Facebook. So Facebook's probably the easiest way to find them. So cool.
yeah,
All right, brother.
Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram.
Great. Thanks again. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you guys. Hopefully this was helpful, and we'll catch y'all later. Thanks.
Of course. Have a great day.
You too. See ya.
Are you still screaming?
Yeah, just waiting for it to finish. It runs a few seconds behind. Looks like it might be a few minutes behind.